Hi, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. This video is in response to a question I had from a YouTube viewer called Heena. Heena, thank you for your question. She wrote, Olivia, please can you shed some light on hyperextension, saying that she struggles with it in some yoga postures. So that's a great question. It's something that I come across in my own body and also in my students. Just briefly, I just want to set out the scope for this video. So this is not about hypermobility. So hypermobility is a genetic condition that you would get diagnosed with by a clinician. And that is obviously not my role. Hyperextension, where your joints go beyond what's considered functionally normal or average, might be a symptom of hypermobility. But just to say, this video isn't diagnosing whether you're hypermobile or not. It is just simply to help you think about how you might manage if you or your students. We're going to talk about elbows and knees. Elbows and knees go beyond straight in common yoga postures. And if you suspect that you might be hypermobile and you want to receive a diagnosis, then you need to speak to a medical professional about that. Okay, so Heena mainly asked about her arms and her elbows. So if I use my arm as a demonstration, so this is what my arm looks like when it's straight, when I reach it out to the side. This doesn't actually feel straight for me. This isn't as far as my elbow can go. When I straighten my arm as far as it can go, it looks like this. And see how, I might have heard my elbow just cracked a little bit then. And see how that's looked like it's going beyond straight. So now my upper arm is pointing straight out to the side, but my forearm is angled a bit down towards the floor. So for me, the way that I manage hyperextension that comes up in my elbows and my knees is when it feels like those joints are going beyond straight, I simply switch on a bit the muscles that would bend that joint. So in your arms, we could sort of broadly say that it's your biceps, these muscles here, sort of inner upper arm, that when they contract, they bend my elbow. So I think the easiest way to do this is probably just to give your arms a little bit of feedback. So you could find something solid like a door frame or a wall. I'm going to put my hand just behind this radiator with my arm straight. Then all you want to do is try and bend your elbow against the resistance of that solid thing and feel what it feels like. So all I'm doing is pushing the radiator towards you. Obviously, because it's fixed to the wall, it's not going anywhere. So try and bend your arm against the resistance of a solid, not moving thing and see what it feels like. As you're doing that, you might kind of prod around your inner upper arm and see how it feels more solid. And then when you relax that, it will go back to being squidgy again. So that feeling of this inner upper arm firing up a little bit, that is what we want to cultivate to try and use your muscles to hold your bones in a straight position rather than going beyond straight. So I commonly see people in Warrior 2, where they're in this position and their elbows, you can see it more clearly in this one of mine, their elbows have hyperextended a bit. So you might, once you've got a feeling of what it feels like against something really solid, to try and bend your elbow, give yourself something a bit lighter feedback. I mean, if you had a little pair of weights, you could use weights. I'm using yoga blocks here. So with my arms like this, all I'm going to do is imagine that these blocks are really heavy and I'm trying to bend my elbows. So if you watch my arms closely, I'm just holding them out and they're as straight as they could possibly go. And then when I switch my biceps on, the bending muscles in my arms, is like I'm just going to grab hold of my blocks. It's like I'm trying to bend my elbows and bring the blocks towards my head, but I'm only doing it the tiniest amount. So I think it's probably easiest to teach your arms to do this when you've got a bit of resistance first, and then when you haven't got any, you're not bearing your body weight on your arms. So I would try those first. And then the posture where I really often see this come up is in downward facing dog. So this one, I'm going to turn around now so you can see my elbows from a different angle. Imagine I was in downward facing dog, which I'm not because the wall's in the way. So someone who doesn't have elbows that hyperextend, their arms might look more like this. For someone who does have elbows that hyperextend, if you watch my arms now, they look more like this. See how they look like kind of bending inwards a little bit? So in downward dog, the insides of my elbows, there's like creases on the insides of my elbows, they're normally kind of facing about towards each other. So if I wasn't in downward dog, I was just kneeling on the floor like I am right now, and I was able to move my hands. If I was to bend my elbows and keep my hands fixed, first of all, my elbows would bend out to the side. Okay? If I was to bend my elbows and keep my upper arms fixed so that my hands would move, that's what would happen. So if you're in downward dog and you can feel that your elbows are going beyond straight and it's uncomfortable and you want to do something about it, then all I want you to do is imagine or create the action of trying to do this with your hands. So I'm sweeping my hands. If I lift up a little bit, I'm sweeping my hands towards each other. It's not that my elbows are bending back that way. My elbows are kind of bending out to the side. So grip the floor and with your hands, try and pull towards each other. It's not that you're trying to pull your elbows towards each other. You're trying to drag your hands across the surface of the floor. Okay? So teaching yourself to do this just when you're just simply working against something solid, like I use a radiator or a wall, and then warrior two, where you're not holding your whole body weight on your arms, and then downward dog when you've got both arms down. Once you've got that feeling of what it feels like, that your brain is just able to say to bicep, switch on a bit, and it pulls your arm straight, then you can apply that to any posture that you like. So Heena in particular asked about side plank. A side plank is going to be even harder to do this in than downward dog because you're just on one arm. So I recommend you go through those steps first. And when you feel like you've got that feeling, then translate it to side plank. So I've been told before in classes when I was a student to like micro bend my elbows or my knees, which it's kind of coming from the same thought process as what I'm telling you now. But I always found it was I didn't really like it because one, who knows how big a micro bend is? So how much you're meant to bend your elbows. And two, it made me, if I was weight bearing and then I was told to bend a little bit, it always made me feel a bit unstable. So rather than thinking bend, like actually bend, imagine you're trying to bend and you're getting kind of stuck. So here it's like I'm getting stuck against the resistance of the mat. Here I was getting stuck against the solidity of the radiator. You might find that you also experience this in knees. So if I pull my trousers a little bit more taut, this isn't as pronounced in my knees as it is in my elbows, but it might be more pronounced in yours or your students' bodies. This is what my leg looks like when it's straight, and this is what it looks like when it goes beyond straight. See how it just kind of, it almost feels like it kind of locks back a little bit. So I see this most commonly in triangle pose and in pyramid pose. So the same rule applies. Like the stuff that bends your legs is down the back. So we can think of it as being like your hamstrings and then one layer of your calf muscles that helps bend your knee as well. So this is really hard to do, again, when you're in your like wide stride, ready for triangle pose. So what I want you to do to teach yourself to work it in this shape is stand with your feet in like the shortest stance triangle they could be. So my feet are out at 90 degrees. And then with your front foot, bend your knee and drag it towards your other foot. And just do that a few times. Make it as difficult for yourself to do as possible. So if you're on a grippy mat, excellent. You're kind of gripping the floor, and make it difficult to bend your knee and drag your foot towards your other one. And then when you've got a feeling of what that feels like, then keep your foot on the floor, but imagine that you're trying to do that, but your foot got stuck. Like somehow someone's put super glue on the floor. So you see how now my leg, I'm not moving anywhere, but it's almost just kind of twitching to life. And then once you've got that, take your feet a little bit wider and try and drag your front foot to your back foot. When you've got that, take your feet a bit wider and try and drag your front foot to your back foot. When you're like almost perhaps at like a triangle pose width stance, then you once keep that feeling of front foot dragging towards back foot as you start to tilt sideways. And as you tilt sideways, you're putting more weight on this front leg. So it might be that you're okay for a while, and then you get to a certain point and suddenly like dunk, your leg locks back again. If you find that, that's okay. Just come back up, reset. So whichever joint you're thinking about trying to not let it hyperextend, just apply the rule. This is my technique that I prefer. Apply the rule of thinking, what muscles would bend that joint? And then teach yourself what it feels like to engage those muscles. So for your arms, we're thinking broadly biceps. For your legs, we're thinking hamstrings, but also a bit calf. So we could just think back of leg. And if it's difficult to do in a yoga posture, don't do it in the full posture first. Like come to a much shorter stance or take your body weight off and teach yourself what it feels like first, and then you can apply it to any yoga posture you like. So Heena and everyone else, I hope that was useful. As always, if you have any other questions, please let me know. I will answer them if I can. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.